Welcome to Wednesday Wisdom, a weekly devotion following the F260 Bible reading plan. This is week 26 of our study, which means that we're halfway through the F260 plan, and we are in Daniel chapter 6. The book of Daniel is a really fun book of the Bible because we get to see just the incredible life of Daniel and some of his friends and some very memorable stories for many of us. In Daniel chapter 6, Daniel has risen to much regard in the kingdom. He actually says he has an extraordinary spirit, and so he's set over the whole realm. He's an administrator of administrators, and these other administrators are trying to find charges against him. They want to bring him down because they don't like that he's getting to do all the ruling and he's getting to make all these decisions. So they try to find ways and areas where they can come against him, but he's clean. He hasn't done anything wrong. And so what these individuals do, these administrators and satraps, they go to King Darius and they say, we need to for 30 days, ban all prayers to any god except you, knowing that Daniel is a man of faith who's going to pray to his God, the one true God of Israel. So they have him ban that. He signs the decree, and they find him praying. Verse 10 says, when Daniel learned that the document had been signed, he went into his house. The windows in its upstairs room opened towards Jerusalem, and 3 times a day he got down on his knees, prayed, and gave thanks to his God, just as he had done before. So even in the face of some slight persecution and some restrictions, Daniel was going to keep praying to God. He was going to serve God over man, and so he continued. Now, these individuals, they found out, they really were tricking Daniel, but they found out that he was praying. They reported it to the king, and they began to petition the king to do something about it. The king said, anyone who did this, anyone who prayed to any other god, would be thrown into the lion's den. And so this was their plan to get rid of Daniel. We're going to pick up in verse 16 of chapter 6. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, may your God, whom you continually serve, rescue you. And he meant this. He actually liked Daniel here. He didn't want to throw him into the lion's den, but he had kind of caught himself in this own trap. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den. The king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signet rings of his nobles, so that nothing in regard to Daniel could be changed. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and he could not sleep. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den to see what happened. And when he reached the den, he cried in anguish to Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God, the king said, has your God, whom you continually serve, been able to rescue you from the lions? Then Daniel spoke with the king, may the king live forever. May my God send his angel and shut the lion's mouth so they haven't harmed me before I was found innocent before him, and also before you, your majesty, I have not done harm. The king was overjoyed and gave orders to take Daniel out of the den. When Daniel was brought up out of the den, he was found to be unharmed, for he trusted in his God. And so we see that Daniel, even though he's in a foreign land, captive by the Babylonians, he's continued to be faithful to God, and God has been faithful to him in many different situations. And this kind of reminds us sort of what happened to Daniel's friends. Remember Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, or as many of us know them as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They would not bow down to the idol that Nebuchadnezzar made, and so they were thrown into the furnace, the fiery furnace, but they were saved. And actually there was one that looked as if the Son of Man or the Son of God was there with them, so we know that Jesus was even with them there. And they said, before they were thrown in, they said, if the God we serve exists, then he can rescue us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he can rescue us from the power of you, the king. But even if he does not rescue us, we want you as king to know that we will not serve your gods or worship the gold statue you set up. The Lord will never fail us. So we see all these men in different situations staying faithful to the Lord. They were in a situation where there were not a lot of people around them that believed what they believe. They were idol worshipers, doing many cruel things, but they continued to stay faithful to God. And we really have to ask ourselves that. In a culture where we're becoming the minority in many ways, of ones who are going to continue to serve Christ and not bow to the culture and bow to the pressures, what are we going to do? Are we going to serve man or serve God? And the answer is very clear. It doesn't mean it won't cost us anything. It doesn't mean it won't be difficult. But ultimately, no matter what happens, whether God rescues us or not, we cannot bow down, because we know in the end that if God is for us, then who can be against us? And we must stay faithful and we must stay true. And what we can do is we can look at men like Daniel. We can look at men like Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and we can see their faithfulness and we see God's faithfulness to them. We must remind ourselves, if God has sent his Son for us, would he not freely give us all good things? He is going to keep us. He's going to hold us secure regardless of what we face. Whatever you face this week, whatever you face in the years to come, know that the Lord is good and that he will keep us. He will hold us fast. Well, I hope that you enjoyed this devotion. We'll see you next week for Wednesday Wisdom. Thank you, and you have a blessed week.